I want to be old. I'm tired of trying to be young. I don't want to be young. I've been young. And to be an older person trying to be young?
Do you know who has been the longest-serving face of L'Oreal? A 67-year-old woman with naturally gray hair, no Botox, no facelifts, and still walking confidently down the red carpet at Cannes. That woman is Andie MacDowell. She was once dropped from the lead role in Tarzan because of her southern accent, once called too mature at just 40. So what made her, someone Hollywood once cast aside for not being sexy enough, become a global icon of age-embracing beauty? This is not just the journey of a movie star. It's the journey of a woman who chose to live truthfully with her age, to live in harmony with nature. Born as Rosalie Anderson MacDowell on April 21, 1958, in the town of Gaffney, South Carolina, Andie didn't grow up in a complete home. Her mother was a music teacher struggling with severe alcoholism. Her father was the director of a lumber company. When Andie was 6, her parents divorced. Andie later admitted to being naturally prone to codependency, having grown up in an environment where she had to become the caregiver instead of being cared for. The constant need to manage situations, to always yield, to hide her emotions, those patterns would later surface vividly in her intense psychological roles, especially her portrayal of a bipolar mother in Maid. She dropped out of Winthrop University and left Carolina with only $2,000 and a Ralph Lauren pencil skirt, heading to New York to become a model. A daring leap for a small-town girl in 1979. But Andie's beauty wasn't easily embraced. With brown hair, tanned skin, and a face deemed too European, she was considered out of fashion among the sea of blonde-haired, blue-eyed models. Her agency even considered renaming her Mac. In the end, Andie kept her real surname and chose Andie, a nickname her older sister used to call her. A simple decision, yet one that reflected quiet determination. To be herself, starting with her name. And that would be a commitment she'd carry for life. Andie MacDowell didn't come to cinema through formal training. She came from the runway. With a background as a Calvin Klein model and a face that had graced campaigns for Vogue and Yves Saint Laurent, she entered Hollywood in 1984 as Jane Porter in the adventure blockbuster Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. It seemed like the perfect opportunity, starring opposite Christopher Lambert in a major Warner Brothers production, adapted from the classic novel by Edgar Rice Burroughs, directed by Hugh Hudson, fresh off his Oscar win for Chariots of Fire. But Hollywood has little mercy for innocence. After filming Wrapped, Andie discovered that all of her lines had been dubbed over by Glenn Close, simply because her Southern accent was deemed unfit for an English lady. That blow didn't just erase her big debut, it shattered the fragile confidence of a newcomer. The press mocked her. Producers grew hesitant. And Andie stood at a crossroads. Quit. Or start over, this time with real craft. She chose the second path. Over the next 4 years, she quietly trained in method acting with coaches from the Actors Studio, personally mentored by Harold Guskin, known for his philosophy of "Don't act, live truthfully." She learned how to make her voice an instrument of feeling instead of a liability. And in 1989, she got a second chance, this time in the lead role of Sex, Lies, and Videotape, directed by an emerging talent named Steven Soderbergh. It was a low-budget indie film, but the story was groundbreaking. A housewife named Anne, trapped in emotional emptiness, finds her life disrupted by a strange man who can only connect with others through videotaped confessions. Andie played Anne with a quiet intensity, nervous eyes, and a slow-burning awareness, a complete transformation from her modeling image. The role propelled the film to win the Palme d'Or at Cannes and earned her the Independent Spirit Award, the Los Angeles Film Critics Association Award, and her first Golden Globe nomination. Ironically, she was secretly pregnant with Rainey during filming, afraid the truth would cost her the role. But this time, no one dubbed her voice. No one replaced her. Sex, Lies, and Videotape became the turning point that proved Andie MacDowell wasn't just beautiful. She could reach emotional depths, even in the most complex characters. From a model once dubbed over for not sounding British enough, she became a defining face of American cinema in the 90s, graceful but unyielding. Sex, Lies, and Videotape wasn't just a career breakthrough, it was a rebirth, a refusal to be defined by where she started, and a declaration that she now owned her voice, literally. If Sex, Lies, and Videotape was the first door that opened to bring Andie MacDowell into the world of true cinema, then the early 1990s were when she climbed to the top, etching herself into the memory of global audiences and becoming a true A-list star in Hollywood. In 1990, she starred alongside Gérard Depardieu in the romantic comedy Green Card. The story of a fake marriage for residency became genuinely engaging thanks to Andie's charming, natural, and understated performance. The film was an unexpected success both commercially and critically, earning her a second Golden Globe nomination and cementing her as an irreplaceable figure in the romantic comedy genre. But her true peak came in 1993 with Groundhog Day, the now classic film directed by Harold Ramis. Opposite Bill Murray, she played a gentle, intelligent, and patient TV producer. Andie didn't try to shine through theatrical flair. Instead, she chose authenticity, simplicity, and subtlety. That quiet restraint became the key to the film's chemistry. If Bill Murray embodied chaos and eccentricity, Andie was the emotional anchor, the one steady force keeping the story grounded. The film became one of the most beloved movies of all time, preserved in the U.S. National Film Registry, with her role praised as the human core of what could have been just a comedic loop. It wasn't Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and it wasn't Groundhog Day. It was Four Weddings and a Funeral, 1994, that truly elevated Andie MacDowell into the ranks of legendary stars in mainstream cinema. Produced on a budget of only around $4 million, a shockingly modest sum for an international film at the time, it became a global phenomenon, grossing over $240 million and shattering every expectation and stereotype about the British rom-com. The seemingly simple story of Four Weddings and a Funeral touched millions with its sincere, intimate, and gently profound emotions. In the film, Andie played Carrie, an American woman who's bold and somewhat enigmatic, dropped into a world of British restraint, manners, and understatement. The contrast wasn't just about nationality or accent. It lived in the way she moved, laughed, looked, and especially in her silences. Opposite Hugh Grant's Charles, a man awkward, hesitant, and emotionally uncertain, Carrie became a sudden spark in his life, elusive, mysterious, but impossible to look away from. What made MacDowell's performance special was that she didn't play the seductive Hollywood archetype, nor the quirky, manic pixie dream girl. Her Carrie was effortless, unforced, with a slow-burn allure, an attraction born from quiet confidence rather than acting tricks or punchy dialogue. As she later recalled, she understood this role needed to be right, more than brilliant. So she chose to play Carrie as herself, not a screen-molded version, but a woman grounded in her own truth. Director Mike Newell and screenwriter Richard Curtis both admitted it. Andie didn't need to do too much. Her mere presence was enough for the audience to understand what Charles felt. The intelligence was in a gaze that knew when to pause, the allure in a smile that held back just enough, and love. It existed in the space between them, not in what was said aloud. The film's most iconic moment, and perhaps the most iconic of Andie's entire career, was the scene in the rain when Carrie says, "Is it still raining? I hadn't noticed." A line so short and simple, yet etched into cinematic history. It was both adored and mocked, but no one could deny its symbolic weight. A woman choosing love without the need for a wedding, in a moment so raw and vivid, it didn't feel like acting at all. The role earned Andie her third Golden Globe nomination, and solidified her status as an A-list star, not just in America, but across Europe, where the film became a modern cultural symbol of British cinema. Four Weddings and a Funeral was even nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, becoming the first working title production to receive global recognition and ushering in a golden era for British romantic comedies. But success wasn't just measured in awards or box office numbers. What made this role an everlasting mark in Andie MacDowell's career was this: she didn't just play a part, she became herself at her most luminous. And for over 3 decades, audiences have continued to remember Carrie as a quiet reminder that sometimes a perfectly timed glance and a genuine presence are all it takes to create something timeless. 3 films, 3 entirely different styles, from witty romance to philosophical comedy to soft emotion, each showed one consistent truth. Andie MacDowell never confined herself to a single mold, yet always brought grace and emotional depth to every role. The 1990s were her golden years. But what's more telling is that even alongside leading men like Gerard Depardieu, Bill Murray, or Hugh Grant, Andie was never overshadowed. She didn't steal the spotlight, but somehow she gave the entire film its heart and its anchor. That's the mark of a true star. And yet, in a strange twist, turning 40, a supposed peak for maturity and craft, was when Andie began to feel Hollywood's indifference toward middle-aged women. She once admitted, "You don't even know who you're supposed to play anymore. They stop writing roles for you." Her 40s and 50s became a strange void, where a star no longer knew whether to step forward or retreat. But Andie didn't retreat. She persisted. With television, indie films, and deeper, more complex characters, even if the spotlight had dimmed. And in recent years, she returned to center stage with a wave of striking performances. The emotionally raw mother in Love After Love, the chilling matriarch in Ready or Not, and the bipolar chaotic mother in Maid, the hit Netflix series where she starred opposite her real-life daughter, Margaret Qualley. It came full circle. From a mother hiding her pregnancy to secure a role, to a woman at 63 shedding all protection, physical and emotional, to portray someone unhinged, unstable, and painfully real. And this time it wasn't to keep a role. It was because Andie chose it. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a new chapter, where she continues to write her career with no embellishment, no hiding. There's a truth few dare to confront. Not all wounds come from strangers. Some of the most enduring pain begins with the people we love the most and follows us through life like a scar we can never fully erase. For Andie MacDowell, that pain began with her mother. She grew up in a broken home with an alcoholic mother and a childhood lacking emotional safety. From an early age, she was forced to toughen up, grow up too soon, and take on the role of caregiver instead of being cared for. That role, one never meant for a child, quietly shaped her personality. Always anxious, always bearing the burden, always feeling responsible for the emotions of others. At 23, her mother died of a heart attack, just 1 year after a brief period of sobriety. Andie was left with a deep sense of loss and regret. Her mother's clarity came too late to heal, too short to forgive, and too fleeting to rebuild a real mother-daughter bond. It wasn't just the death of a loved one, it was the death of a hope that someday even a broken family could feel warm again. Years later, as a mother herself, Andie faced a different kind of pain, this time from her daughter. Margaret Qualley, a rising actress and Golden Globe nominee, once said that, as a child, she felt like every time her mother went off to film a movie, it was like she was going off to kiss another man. It wasn't a complaint. It was a child's attempt to make sense of her mother's recurring absence during the most formative moments. And Andie, reflecting back, admitted it. She had tried to suppress her maternal instincts to maintain a place in an industry that punished vulnerability. She had calculated how much to mention her children on camera. She had suppressed her longing to avoid being seen as unprofessional. But in that silence, a gap had formed. A gap fame could never fill. As a mother, Andie loved instinctively. As an artist, she agonized over her choices. And only when those two roles collided, in the 2021 series Made, where she and Margaret starred opposite each other, did Andie finally get the chance to truly listen to her daughter? Not through scripted lines, but through the eyes of a woman, a fellow actor, a grown child, looking at her mother with all the weight of childhood and a quiet, adult understanding. The wounds left by her own mother gave Andie a sense of unresolved forgiveness. The wounds from her daughter, a sense of not being fully understood. But between those two silences, she continued on, continued being a mother, not perfect, but deeply honest. And that, perhaps, is the truest image of a woman who has lived through every role, only to finally arrive at the most authentic one, herself. Born into a fractured family, Andie MacDowell once held on to a simple dream: to have a real home, a true family, no alcohol, no sorrow, no divorce, just a normal life, the kind she never had as a child. In 1985, during a Gap commercial shoot in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Andie met Paul Qualley, a former American football player of Norwegian descent who had just transitioned into modeling and would later become a cattle rancher in Montana. What seemed like a chance encounter between two people from vastly different worlds, one from fashion's bright lights, the other from wide plains and pastures, marked the beginning of a hopeful new chapter in her life. Just a year later, they married and moved to a sprawling ranch in Montana, a place where Andie believed she could raise her children in peace, far from the chaos of Hollywood. 3 children followed: Justin, 1986, Rainey, 1990, and Margaret, 1994. To the public, Andie MacDowell was the image of complete success, a Hollywood star and devoted mother, balancing a thriving career with a seemingly idyllic family life. But the truth behind it all was far more complicated. Andie once candidly shared, "I definitely wanted a successful career, but I didn't want to give that up in exchange for not having a family." So she fought to hold on to both, working and mothering simultaneously. She filmed while pregnant, hid her baby bump to avoid losing roles, gave birth, then returned to set, not out of ambition, but from fear of losing everything if she stepped away. Paul, in contrast, gradually withdrew from the spotlight, choosing to care for the family and pursue a quiet ranch life. Over time, that mismatch became distance. In 1999, after 13 years together, Andie and Paul officially divorced, a conclusion she had never imagined. Everything she had longed for, a stable home, lasting love, had now fallen into the same pattern that once haunted her childhood: separation. Later, she confided that the pain wasn't just about losing a husband, it was the feeling that the past was repeating itself. As a single mother raising 3 children, she moved back to North Carolina, closer to her sister, and poured herself into giving her kids a complete childhood. Not perfect, but full of love. Despite the split, Andie and Paul maintained a respectful relationship. They attended their daughter Margaret's wedding to music producer Jack Antonoff in 2023 together. And in early 2025, Paul appeared with Margaret at the Golden Globes when Jack couldn't attend, wearing a t-shirt featuring Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Margaret's first major film role. It was a silent message: "I'm proud of you." Their marriage may not have been perfect by conventional standards, but in its imperfection, they built a family strong enough to raise accomplished children and preserved what mattered most: kindness toward one another, even after they were no longer a couple. After the end of her 13-year marriage, Andie MacDowell entered a phase of deep change, not only in her personal life, but also in how she redefined love, closeness, and trust. And before she could fully recover, she stepped into another relationship that drew media attention, this time with her co-star Dennis Quaid. They met while filming HBO's Dinner with Friends, a story about marriage, separation, and the quiet wounds of long-term relationships. The film was fiction, but the emotions were real. The connection between Andie and Dennis began with their emotionally intense scenes and grew in private conversations after filming. It was a brief relationship, quiet and without scandal. But for Andie, still reeling from a bittersweet breakup, it became an emotional experiment that wasn't easy, not giving up on the dream of a lasting family. Still holding on to the hope for a lasting family, in 2001, Andie MacDowell married Rhett Hartzog, a successful businessman and her former high school classmate from Gaffney, South Carolina. They reconnected through Andie's sister, a coincidence that felt like it was pulled straight from the romantic films she once starred in. At the time, Andie was in her 40s. Her 3 children were growing up fast, and Hollywood was beginning to turn its back on middle-aged actresses. Perhaps she needed something steady in a world that felt increasingly uncertain. Rhett, who had known Andie long before she became famous, represented something familiar, grounded, and most importantly, outside the world of showbiz. They were married on November 10, 2001, in a private ceremony that the media nonetheless celebrated as a real-life fairy tale. Many believed it was the perfect final chapter for a star who had been through heartbreak. But just 3 years later, in 2004, they quietly divorced, without drama and without any clear explanation. After spending years retreating from the spotlight, living in nature and raising her children in Montana, Andie MacDowell didn't return to Hollywood with a reinvention. She didn't dye her hair. She didn't get Botox. She didn't get a facelift. She let her hair go gray, let the lines show, let time live on her face as part of the story. It wasn't indifference. It was a deliberate choice, a declaration, I'm still beautiful, just in my age's own way. Andie called it aging with intention. She didn't fight her age. She chose to live in harmony with it. In interviews, she emphasized, I don't need to look younger to feel valuable. Keeping her gray hair wasn't a manifesto. It was a healing decision, one that made her feel more at peace with herself than ever before. That was when she realized, I don't need to outrun time. I just need to live truthfully and live well. And paradoxically, it was that very choice that made her the longest-serving face in L'Oreal's history, a brand synonymous with the phrase, because you're worth it. In an industry obsessed with youth, MacDowell became living proof of a new definition of beauty, mature, natural, and unafraid of being visibly older. She once shared that during a shoot with legendary photographer Irving Penn, he bluntly told her she looked like an old woman just because she'd recently given birth and her body hadn't snapped back. It was a shock, but she didn't retreat. She didn't apologize for being a mother, and she didn't try to become someone else to please anyone. Later, when her hair began to gray, she let it grow out. Some mocked her, some advised her to dye it. But Andie understood. If we're ashamed of aging ourselves, how can we ever expect aging to be respected? And that is precisely why L'Oreal continues to choose her, not despite her age, but because of it. In an era where middle-aged women are routinely excluded from advertising campaigns, Andie MacDowell walks the red carpet at Cannes with radiant silver hair, a confident smile, and unapologetic wrinkles, becoming the face of a beauty that hides nothing. Though she's a global icon of cinema and beauty, Andie MacDowell lives simply, inwardly, and far from glamorous excess. At 67, she doesn't reside in a luxurious Los Angeles mansion, but in a quiet home nestled in nature on Kiowa Island, South Carolina, where, in her words, you can't see any other houses, just trees. That serenity is the foundation of both her spirit and her appearance. No complex rejuvenation routines, no luxury spas. Andie maintains her look through relatable habits, sleeping well, eating clean, practicing yoga, walking, drinking plenty of water, and not stressing about appearances. She uses simple skincare products, wears minimal makeup when unnecessary, and, most importantly, refuses to chase anyone else's standards. "I have a wonderful body," she once said, not to boast, but to emphasize that it doesn't need to be younger to be worthy of love. She once declined a dress because it was too tight and left her in pain all night. The next morning, she shed both the dress and the belief that women must suffer to be beautiful. For Andie, beauty means being pain-free, being real, and never apologizing for aging. That attitude carries through her approach to fashion and public image. She still loves silk dresses and red carpets, but only chooses what makes her feel comfortable, confident, and not forced to please anyone. Her salt and pepper hair has become a quiet statement, and her stride, still proud and powerful. She also nurtures her mind through book clubs, conversations with intelligent friends, steering clear of toxic relationships, and asking herself regularly, "What did I grow in today?" For her, inner growth is what makes a woman truly and lastingly captivating. And that image, a woman who doesn't fight time, but lives with it, loves it, and makes it more beautiful than ever, has inspired millions of middle-aged women around the world. Andie didn't change for Hollywood. She made Hollywood change the way it sees older women. Very few women in Hollywood have found success across all three realms: film, television, and modeling. Andie MacDowell is one of the rare few. But what makes her a true icon isn't the number of roles or awards. It's the way she has redefined beauty, power, and age on her own terms. At 67, Andie is not only the longest-serving face of L'Oreal, she's a symbol of an entire generation of women learning to love themselves, every wrinkle, every strand of gray hair. To her, aging isn't a loss. It's an intentional process, a journey of maturity that women deserve to live fully, to be seen, and to be respected. Speaking at Glamour Icons Only, Andie shared that she wanted to redefine the word matronly, not as something weak or outdated, but as a form of beauty that is empowered, elegant, and profound. And that's exactly what she embodies every time she appears in public. Not chasing youth, not apologizing for getting older, but walking forward with honesty, with pride, and inspiring millions of middle-aged women around the world. Andie MacDowell doesn't need to shout to be heard. She only needs to show up, and that alone is enough to make an impact. After years of retreating into nature, Andie MacDowell hasn't chosen full retirement. At 67, she continues to work steadily, but now with more intention, depth, and control than ever before. She currently stars in the hit Hallmark Channel series The Way Home, a multi-generational family drama that has entered its third season with consistent viewership and positive reviews. As Dell Landry, MacDowell portrays a mature, layered, and emotionally rich woman, the kind of character Hollywood often overlooks. That's exactly why she chose the role, to help rewrite how older women are portrayed on screen. In 2024, she also appeared in the action film Red Right Hand, alongside Orlando Bloom, playing a ruthless crime boss named Big Cat, a sharp, gritty character that earned her positive critical attention for its bold departure from her usual roles. To slow life down, she moved to a quiet home on Kiowa Island, South Carolina, a place where she feels peaceful and deeply connected to nature. In an interview with People, MacDowell shared that life after her children had grown gave her space to rediscover herself, and she's learned to cherish every moment of the present. In 2022, she became a grandmother for the first time when her eldest son, Justin, welcomed a baby girl. By the end of 2024, her daughter Rainey also had her first child, making Andie a grandmother twice over. She hasn't yet decided whether to be called Nana or Grandma, but she described the experience as a soul-to-soul connection, a joy no spotlight could ever match. Alongside these life changes, she has also spoken publicly about her health. In early 2025, MacDowell revealed she had been diagnosed with piriformis syndrome, a condition that causes pain in the hip and leg. However, thanks to regular training with a personal coach, she reported significant improvement and described the progress as almost miraculous. Though long past her career peak, Andie MacDowell has never seen herself as someone on the sidelines. She continues to speak out against ageism and actively calls on Hollywood writers to create more roles for older women. Not just tired stereotypes, but characters with depth, soul, and vitality. "I've had my moment," she said, "but I still want great roles. Don't write hollow elderly characters." In an industry that changes too slowly, MacDowell isn't just someone who adapts. She's someone who helps drive that change, with honesty, resilience, and unwavering belief in her own worth. Andie MacDowell is not a symbol crafted by Hollywood. She is the product of time, of personal loss, of honest roles, and of a courageous journey to become herself, no matter what the world expected of her. From a model dismissed for looking too ethnic, to a rising actress whose voice was replaced for sounding too Southern, from a single mother to a global icon of natural beauty, Andie's path was never smooth. But it is the folds and creases of that journey that make her portrait so vivid and powerful. She doesn't fight age, she lives with it. She doesn't strive to please the masses, she chooses to live truthfully. And because of that, Andie MacDowell has become a rare role model for millions of middle-aged women. Proof that you don't have to stay young to be beautiful, don't have to be perfect to be loved, and don't have to pretend to stay under the spotlight. In a world that once discarded women after 40, Andie didn't just survive, she walked forward with pride, silver hair shining, eyes full of confidence, and a silent message. Age is not the end of your story. It's the most beautiful part, if you dare to keep writing. Do you love the journeys of strong women like Andie MacDowell? Don't forget to follow us to discover more inspiring stories just like hers.